Our story here starts in 596 AD, when Pope St. Gregory sent St. Augustine to England, and then St. Wilfrid evangelized the people of Sussex in the 7th century. England, known as Our Lady's Dowry before the so-called Reformation, remained a committed Catholic country for almost the next 1,000 years, right up until the 1530s, when King Henry VIII, using the excuse of wanting a divorce from his wife Catherine of Aragon, broke with Rome and plundered the English Catholic Church, destroying 800 monasteries, killing many of its clergy, and making our Catholic Mass illegal. He was a thoroughly tyrannical leader and bully. To make things worse, for 5 centuries now, England has been in denial about the role of Roman Catholicism in shaping it, because of extremely effective anti-Catholic propaganda following the Reformation. Mercifully, in the past 50 years, all that has begun to change, and the truth of those dark days of Catholic persecution is finally becoming wider known through the revisionist school of Reformation history, and in particular from Professor Eamon Duffy at Cambridge University. During those dark days, the Catholic faith was kept alive principally by wealthy Catholic landowning families who risked their wealth and even their lives by allowing Holy Mass to be celebrated secretly within their premises, many of which were specially built with priest hides, usually known as priest holes, where a priest would have to hide if a government raiding party appeared. We have some 3 here at West Grinstead, and one of which can be seen on the way to the secret chapel. Only a handful of these sites managed to remain undetected for the whole of that requisite period, and this is one of them. We know that nobody was caught here because our buildings remain intact. Destroying them was one of the penalties against any family which was discovered allowing Mass to be celebrated or harbouring a priest. Here at West Grinstead, the local landowning family were the Carylls, who owned a swathe of houses and farms stretching from Hampshire through to East Sussex. This devout Catholic family gave many of its sons and daughters to the church as priests and religious, and from 1534 they created a long line of devoted priests who played their part in keeping the Catholic faith alive here in those recusant times. The Carylls were but a few Catholic landowners in the country who were determined to keep our God-given faith alive by celebrating Holy Mass in absolute secrecy, here in a hayloft for 200 years, and then for a further 100 years in private once this country had returned to a more reasonable monarchy with the Georges. In the process, the brave Carylls risked their lives and lost nearly all of their wealth in maintaining the daily celebration of Holy Mass. It was so bad here that, typically of this sort of area, very divided community, most of whom had given in and become Anglican. And a coded message had to go out to local Catholic families to tell them what time Mass would be. And this coding was done by washing. Typically in that time, the ladies would put their washing out on the hedgerows, local hedgerows, but they were put in a certain coded form in a pattern which would indicate the time of the Mass, and only the Catholics would be aware of that coding. The chosen treatment for non-attendance at Anglican services in the case of wealthy families like the Carylls was to impose huge fines on them. In today's money, some of them would have been around £1 million each. So the Carylls lost nearly all of their land and the wealth of their buildings to pay for these fines. The penalty for a Catholic priest, however, caught celebrating Mass, was to put him on a mock treason trial, torture him before he was hanged, drawn and quartered, an evil, barbaric form of death. Blessed Francis Bell was one such priest who was caught at St Albans, north of London. One of the charges against him was that he had celebrated Mass here at West Grinstead. So they knew Mass was being celebrated at West Grinstead, but they never found where. There are some relics of Blessed Francis Bell here in our secret chapel. The River Ada runs about a quarter of a mile to the south of the priest's house and was often used to transport people, including priests, travelling incognito between London and the continent. The priest's house here was known to these travellers as a Catholic safe house, one of a few in West Sussex, where they could receive hospitality and safely stay undetected. The Carylls were being particularly harassed by a local Protestant family who greatly coveted West Grinstead Park and its manor house. The magistrates at nearby Horsham finally gave in to their demands, and the Carylls were removed. However, before their final departure, they made provision for the remaining Catholic flock at West Grinstead. Firstly, the priest's house was left to the Catholic Church via Bishop Richard Challoner, who was the only remaining semblance of 17th century Catholic hierarchy, in order that Mass could continue to be offered. Secondly, the south side of the priest's house was extended, and behind a typical Georgian domestic exterior, a church was created. Bishop Challoner made a visitation to West Grinstead Mission in 1741 and recorded that he found 80 Catholics at Mass. It's extraordinary to think that that was after a couple of centuries from the start of the Reformation, that 80 Catholics who'd been acting in secret were at Mass. So it is that West Grinstead can claim to have celebrated the holy sacrifice of the Mass continuously since that time that St. Wilfrid first brought the faith to Sussex in the 7th century. Further, the priest's house is thought to be the oldest continuously occupied Catholic presbytery in England. The departure of the Caryll family and the Franciscan priests which had mostly served the mission was timed with the arrival of French émigré priests who had fled to this country from the French Revolution. Thankfully for all English Catholics, emancipation was finally decreed in English law in 1829, and the bishops of England and Wales were reinstated in 1850. One of these French émigré priests, Jean-Marie Denis, was appointed priest here in 1863. With the encouragement of the first re-established Bishop of Southwark, Bishop Thomas Grant, Monsignor Denis set about the revival of West Grinstead in a remarkable way. Bishop Thomas Grant, on a visitation of encouragement to West Grinstead, declared, "This mission has nothing to fear. It has seen far worse times than these. It has protectors in heaven, and you will see at West Grinstead things that will surprise you." Inspired by his bishop, Monsignor Denis straightaway began to make improvements. He opened a school for poor children in a wooden stable behind the house, which soon grew to accommodate 200 orphaned children. He also made plans for the building of a new church. Although the history of this Catholic mission goes back to the days of Henry VIII, the shrine of Our Lady of Consolation of West Grinstead is comparatively recent. With the departure of the Carylls in the late 18th century, there was little local financial support. So from 1876, Monsignor Denis begged the necessary funds, not only locally but also in France, Belgium and Holland. to enable the building of this fine late 19th century neo-Gothic church here. Rome had agreed from the outset that this church should be built as a shrine in honor of Our Lady and in thanksgiving for the restitution of the Catholic faith in England. It is indeed the first Catholic Marian shrine in honor of Our Lady to be established in Britain following the Reformation. When choosing a title, Monsignor Denis reverted to a well-established devotion to Our Lady, which has its origin at Turin in northern Italy. The West Grinstead Shrine to Our Lady of Consolation, West Grinstead, was founded by Pope Leo XIII. The ceremony of crowning was performed before a crowd of 3,000 pilgrims in 1893 by the papal delegate Bishop Butt, representing the Holy See and Pope Leo XIII.